Well, hello, and welcome to the PJH Writing Command Center for another podcast episode from God Bless the Keg Publishing, LLC. And I am John Hausleben of God Bless the Keg Publishing, LLC. I am the flagship author, chief photographer, music reviewer, music critic, do-everything guy here at God Bless the Keg Publishing, LLC, with a little help from my friends, and here we go. And the friends are gathered here today on this glorious Easter Sunday. I'm recording this early in the morning on Easter Sunday, 2026. And happy Easter to everyone who's celebrating. Happy Passover. Happy Sunday. Happy day. Whatever you're celebrating, just be happy. And it's fantastic. So in keeping in accordance with kind of like a tradition here, and I have to mention that this is the 51st podcast we recorded. We had this milestone last podcast, so it's kind of amazing how time has gone here since we started this podcast on a little whim. And this is now going to be the 51st. So in keeping with the traditions that we do, we generally do record a special holiday podcast episode. I should be taking a day off, right? Shouldn't I be taking a day off, you guys? Huh? Should I? What are you laughing at? I never get a day off. But we love doing this. So, but before we get too deep into it, if you're a first-time tuner in, or if that's even a word, then welcome. If you're a longtime follower, subscriber of all these 51 episodes, hey, if someone has listened to 51 of the podcast episodes, send me an email. God bless the Keg Publishing at gmail.com. I'd like to know that. And I send you a special little gift. How about that? We still have some of those second printing of the postcards, the QSL cards with the God Bless the Keg Publishing LLC QSL card. Yeah, I send you guys one of that. At any rate, so before we get too deep, I guess we can rattle pages here. And here we go for dramatic effect. And even though it's Easter, you can still use your little Orphan Annie decoder pin that you got for Christmas. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Corporate Facilities Group Incorporated, the leader in technical consulting, facilities maintenance, facilities management, and operations, as well as property management and maintenance services throughout America. And now, CFG Incorporated is proud to announce a new department, a new initiative, headed up by the amazing Mr. Steve McMillan. So let's give it up, friends, for Steve. Great guy. Steve brings as many years of experience as he manages pre-construction services and estimating for residential development, residential renovations, and light commercial projects for CFG Incorporated. So, before you spend big bucks on a project, let old Steve Aruski check out the contractor's scope and price to make sure your hard-earned money is going in exactly the right place. Check them out on the web at www.corporatefacilitiesgroup1.com. That's www.corporatefacilitiesgroup1.com. And many thanks to Lydia, Steve, Liliana, Summer the doggy, Smokey the kitty cat. Happy Easter to you guys down there in beautiful Marietta, Georgia. Yes, indeed. So as we mentioned, we always, and oh, yes, before I forget, I don't have any special announcements, but I had a couple, they didn't make it in time. Sorry about that. And once more, keep in mind, it is a weekly podcast, but if you have a special event, a charity, a group function, not-for-profit, send it to Paulie that you'd like me to announce on the air and promote. Be happy to do that. Send it to Paulie at godblessthekegpublishing at gmail.com. So I mentioned this is a 51st podcast, and, I'm creeping up. I looked at the statistics here. Since we changed our feed on the hosting site, I don't know how, maybe just before Christmas, don't remember. At any rate, we have different analytics and statistics. It's really cool. So able to break stuff down. Last week, the week before, we had Jeff, the amazing musical wizard, talking about progressive rock. We had Frankie T with the NHL All-Stars. So we've been very, very popular on the airwaves. And being a ham radio guy and being a military radio guy, I'm used to my horrible voice traveling around the world and hitting different countries and working different countries on the air with Morse code and digital and all the things we do. But I looked at the download statistics. It's really fascinating. So thank you to everybody out there. And I've gotten some great comments this week and a number of listeners chiming in. But just looking, we've been in Vietnam, United States of America, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico. Shout out to Mexico, Brazil, Burundi, Argentina, Iraq, Uzbekistan, Australia, New Zealand, Morocco, India, Malta, Panama, Chile, Pakistan, Republic of the Congo, Belgium, England, Scotland, Wales, Kenya, Indonesia, Costa Rica, Germany, Nigeria, and Canada. My gosh, that's it's so cool. Thank you so much, everybody, tuning in. It's really a thrill to be able to do this. It's so much fun. Thank you so much. So being Easter and all the things that Easter means to Christianity, really, you can just celebrate spring too, right? It's a rebirth. If you know you're not a Christian and Easter is not a holiday you celebrate, I think the rebirth of the world coincides with a lot of different things. You know, the flowers are coming and they're blooming, and then you got the trees, and the guys on the trees are sending out all kinds of pollen before they make leaves, and everybody's walking around in a fog. And Central Virginia, the allergies are no joke here. And I made the mistake of leaving the windows open one night because it was lovely. It's been lovely weather, low humidity, gentle temperatures, and that pollen came in all over the writing command center. I had to use my special microfiber mop to get it all up. But at any rate, a rebirth of the world. And then you have Easter and all the things that go along, and the solemn Holy Week, which is very dramatic. And my family, my dear mom, and I just spoke to her yesterday and checked in. I'll call her later after they have their Easter supper there. And she was so looking forward to Easter, and she was listening to going to listen to the Mass. And it was a long winter for dear mom, long winter. Some medical issues popped up. I mean, she's going to be 92 in June, so, but sharp as a tack and just tough as nails too, really. Old age is not for sissies. And she said to me, you know, Paulie, the Holy Week was so emotional. And dear mom always got emotional on Good Friday. I remember Good Friday between 12 and 3 o'clock, she would always say, we really shouldn't talk. We should be solemn. We should be silent. And I know growing up in the Anglican or Episcopal Church here in America, they have Good Friday services, tenebrae services that are very dramatic and up and down, and darkness service. We have them in the Lutheran Church too. And I got to tell you a funny story about the Good Friday, but maybe I'll save that for next special Easter podcast episode. And I have a tenebrae story where the pastor George asked me to help him, and everything went astray. I was a bad assistant. And then Easter Sunday story too at church. But dear mom, she said, you know, it really was very emotional. And she always was, like I said. But then she hits me with this, and she says, you know, Paulie, I just finished reading the new book. So my new novel came out on St. Paddy's Day, Quest for Good, Story of Hope and Joy. And I wrote it to be a feel-good novel. It's an easy read. It's a simple read. It has cool characters, and it's just an easy, fun story to read. It's a novel, but it's not overly long. It's fairly short, about 75, 80,000 words, something like that. And she said, dear mom says to me, oh, Paulie, I wept my eyes out at the end of the book. I was like, what, Ma? What? And she says, oh, yeah, I cried. It was so wonderful. I was like, Mom, I didn't want you to cry. I didn't write. This wasn't the reaction I wanted. And she said, well, you know, I finished it on Good Friday, and it was a happy cry. It was a cry of joy about how amazing you put it all together. And I thought to myself, wow, this is my son putting these words together. This is my son doing these things and spreading joy. And it really hit me hard. I think I wanted to cry too. And my sister, my beloved sister, Dottie, she was in the background too. And she's laughing because I said, I didn't want you to cry, dear mom. But it's a happy, feel good story, and it's been selling quite well, and I appreciate all the feedback. But then dear mom says to me, she doesn't hear too good anymore, and it's a struggle to get through. And I know she enjoys the special holiday podcast episodes that we do. And I don't think the rated series, the music is her bag. I don't think the hockey guys podcasts are her bag, but certainly she does enjoy the special holidays, and she really enjoys when I read the stories. And I said, well, dear mom, I haven't picked what story I'm going to read. And I looked through the spring collection, and I was going to pick Frankie the Garden Gnome, which is not really an Easter story, but it is a spring story. And then I had mentioned to her, she listened last year, and she said, you didn't really read the show. She remembers the name of these stories, but she said you did talk about it, but you didn't read. It's too long a story. I could never read the show from the spring collection, which was the special Easter podcast last year. So I hung up with dear mom, and I'll call her later, like I said, but I started to go through all the stories. And I had flirted with the idea, and I mentioned it to Jeff, the musical wizard, when we met early in the morning to solve all the world's issues. And I mentioned to Jeff that it was, because I'm not a Luddite, I'm not an anti-technology guy. I beat on AI and all that stuff, and some of the books are available on the Google Play books in this audio narrated thing. So I said, maybe I'll let the technology take a swing at it. So I listened to a couple of the stories. Narrator was Madison, and it's too robotic for me. I didn't want to go that route. So I studied a lot of the stories, and I finally settled on one. And that's what I'm going to read for the special podcast episode. But, Jeff, the musical wizard, said something very profound to me. And he challenged me. And I think it's great to have a little self-examination all the time, every day. Examine yourself. And with all this horribleness going on in the news and all this terrible emotional things that we're all going through in the world these days, it's nice to just escape with music or books or reading, meditation, prayer, whatever your bag is, or just taking a walk on a spring day. But self-examination is a great thing. And the musical wizard said to me, Paulie, you're a Christian writer. You're a Christian author in many ways. And, looking through all the stories here, I can't deny that there's a lot of religious influences in my books. And a lot of things I write about. Of course, Pastor Paul John Henson is the famous number 27 from the goalie days from the Adventures of Harry and Paul. And he goes on to be a pastor and goes on to be a bishop in the Lutheran Church. So there's a lot of things that come along with that. But particularly in the flash fiction, there are a lot of independent religious stories, not focused on any one specific religion, but definitely quite a bit of writings about that. So I think Jeff's observation was very right on and very cool, and I thank him for that. And it caused me to look through all these stories to pick something special, and I landed on one that I should have thought of right away, and it came to me. And reading this story, I'm going to read this, and it made me think of a theology class I took years and years ago. And it was a theology class that touched upon all different religions. And I remember the professor getting up in front on the board there. He wrote down all kinds of religions of the world, Buddhism and Islam and Judaism and Christianity and Native American beliefs and all the South Pacific islands and all kinds of different religions. And then he took common sayings from religions. He put, be kind to your neighbor, God is love, and all these just common things that are throughout all religions. And he just wrote these random sayings. And then he connected all these lines between all these religions. And all these thoughts and all these sayings and all these teachings were common throughout all the religions. And he looked at the students, he said, even if you're not Islam or you're not from Judaism or Christianity, what's wrong with the commandments? Even if you're just a person who's an atheist or an agnostic, what's wrong with following the commandments? It would make the world a better place. And then he challenged us. He says, I want you to write one sentence here on what I've written on the board and taught today. And I studied all the lines and all the sayings, love thy neighbor as you love yourself, and all these peace on earth, goodwill to men, and all these things. And the sentence that I wrote is, there is more that joins us than divides us. And I wish humankind could understand that. And I always kept that sentence. I have a little book I have my writings in, and that hit me as I was looking for this story. So the story I'm going to read is from Flash Fiction Piece, and I'm going to read it right from the book here, so you can hear me flip the pages. And it is from Flashes, Sparks, and Shorts, Flash 3. And the name of the story is A Few Beers with Jesus. And I wrote this story in about 20 minutes, late on a Saturday night. And I think I told the story, a reader had sent me on one of the mailbag podcasts. And maybe it was, what was the quickest story you ever wrote? Or can you remember writing a really good story? Something like that. And I remember writing this story really, really late at night on a Saturday. And I knew it was really hard hitting, and I really, really enjoyed writing it. And it came so fast out of the blue. And I thought to myself, wow, I love this story. And I thought I just had to share the story with somebody. So I knew Lydia stayed up late, my good friend Lydia. And I texted her and said, hey, you happen to be awake? and she likes to watch movies on Saturday night. And she's like, yeah, Paulie, what's up? So I said, you want to read a story I just wrote, and I think it's really, really good. And she said, yeah, sure. So I put it into a PDF real quick and attached it and sent it to her. Didn't take her long to respond. And she said, my goodness. She said, that's a fantastic story. What are you going to do with it? And I did share it with another publication as long as I could keep the publishing rights, and they published it first, and then I published it for this book. So here we go. And Dear Mom said, only you, Paulie, could write a story about having beers with Jesus. Hey, there's more that joins us than divides us. So every Tuesday for about 5 years, they met for beers at the local gin joint, 5th and Main Street. It was a family joint. Nothing fancy, but the beer was always cold. Pints were still only $4. They met here many years ago, became drinking buds. 2 New Jersey guys that hit it off, and now they had a tradition. Except if Tuesday fell on a holiday. Matt and Dave. Matt was 79 years young, long since retired from a job as a car salesman. He made a good living, solid enough to be fairly comfortable in his retirement. His wife was 2 years younger than he was, and she was getting along well enough, too. Their children long since moved away from New Jersey to more affordable states and good jobs. New Jersey, within all its glory, had its issues. One child lived in North Carolina, and one lived in Florida. They had 3 grandchildren. Dave was 82 years old. His wife passed about 3 years earlier from cancer. Thankfully, she did not suffer too long. One child in California, but Dave had 5 grandchildren. Be fruitful and multiply. Dave did not see them often, but he spoke to them on the phone and spoke with his family every Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So Dave, Matt asked as they nursed their 3rd pint of cold beer together, if you didn't have me to hang out with and have a few beers with, let me ask you, Who would you like to have a few beers with? Dave answered right away, Jesus. I would like to have a few beers with Jesus. Matt almost spit his beer out, but instead he swallowed hard and moved on. Jesus? Really? Why? Because I need to ask him a few questions. I think he would be a cool guy to hang out with, too, Dave said as he drained his last drop of beer and waved to old Phil, the bartender, for a refill. Dave pointed at Matt's beer, too. Then he pointed at his chest to signal that the tab was on him. Phil poured them and dropped them. Doesn't Jesus prefer wine? Matt asked as he sipped the last drop of his pint and then dug into the fresh one. Nope. Wine is reserved for a much more sacred occasion. Fair enough. So, what would you ask him, Dave? Lots. First off, was Lazarus a good friend like you and I are? Drinking buddies? His answer? Yep. I cried because he was. Friends are forever, and Jesus was human, just like we are. He knows our pain at the loss of loved ones. Dave took a long sip of beer, and it was apparent that the beer was softening him up a bit. Gotcha. Next on the question list. Geez, God sent so many servants. Moses, Elijah, John, Luke, Abraham, King David, Noah, Peter, John the Baptist, Paul, Daniel, the archangels. Why did the people still not listen? Good question. What would his answer be? Dave pondered it for a moment as old Phil and some other patrons now leaned in and listened. Because we're stupid and stubborn and hopeless without Jesus and his willingness to die for us? Now a crowd gathered. Wow, hard-hitting, my old friend. We are stupid? Yep, we sure are. Then I would ask him if St. Michael can really kick Satan's backside. Twice. And Jesus would smile, drain his glass of beer, order another one, and politely say, no one can beat St. Michael. It would be no contest. I would ask him if that spear in the side hurt, and the 40 days of fasting really were no fun at all, and carrying that cross was super painful, and was dying really all that bad? And Jesus would nod his head with tears in his eyes, and he would recall all those horrors and quietly say, yes. But I would ask Jesus, in between all that horror and pain and suffering, did he have fun in his time on earth? Hey, how cool was the wedding where you turned the water into wine? Old Phil, the bartender, jumped in and entered his opinion. I would go for that. It would be very profitable. Matt smiled and then turned to Dave and asked, and what would Jesus' answer be? Sure, he had a lot of fun, lots of parties, learned to trade, made things with his hands, made friends, lived a simple life, never owned a home or had credit cards or debt, never traveled really far from his home. He slept on dirt floors, never had a designated parking space or a fancy office or a car. He knew pain, he knew joy, he glorified God. He would tell me that the purpose of life is to glorify God. Jesus did that better than anyone else. He healed people. I bet the blind man at the pool in Bethesda sure celebrated that day. Matt took another long sip of beer, nodded his head in agreement, and spoke in a voice just above a whisper. Blind from birth. I can't even imagine the joy. Silence ensued and set in. Some pensive pondering. Dave had hit a nerve with many of his listeners and fellow patrons. Old Phil paused in slinging the drinks. Finally, Dave spoke up to break the silence. Yep, I would ask Jesus after his third beer, will I see my wife again in heaven? I loved her so. Jesus would tell me yes. Then I would ask him, why are we so dumb? And Jesus would say, because you are, and I once was human. Then I would ask him, why did you do it? Why did you die so horribly so that we could live in eternity when we're so disrespectful and so arrogant and so uncaring and so unrepentant? No one answered. No one breathed. Tears rolled down Dave's cheeks as he answered his own fictitious scenario question. Jesus would say, because God loves us, and that was the mission that God gave him to do, to save us, to laugh at Satan and his temptations. There was no other way. And Jesus would add, the best thing that we can ever do for each other is love without judgment. Just love each other, no matter what. Dave drained the last drop of his beer and plopped the empty pint glass on the bar counter. Then I would thank Jesus, shake his hand, pay our tabs, and be on my way. Dave slid out of his bar stool and he wobbled a bit. Anyway, this has been profound. Thanks for another Tuesday, Matt. Today is on me. I'll see you next week, God willing. Old Phil, the bartender, hustled over as Dave reached for his wallet. The old bartender shook his head and violently waved his hands in the air. Phil shouted, "No, no, no." He then lowered his voice to a solemn tone. Let me tell you, this is where the bartender would step in and say, "No charge. The beers are on the house. Thank you, Jesus, but there's no charge today. You already paid your tab in full." Old Phil could not hold back the tears as he struggled to say a few more words. And then some. A few beers with Jesus. From Flashes, Sparks, and Shorts, Flash 3. And I guess that's the message. There's more that joins us than what divides us. And I have to agree, Dear Mom is right. I did write a flash fiction piece about having beers with Jesus. So, but the tab is paid in full. And if we could go through life and realize at times how lucky we are. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things. There's a lot of tough things, a lot of horrible things. But for the most part, there's joy all around, right? There's glorious things all around. And spring brings that after a long, hard, cold winter. And as much as I love the winter, I have to admit that spring's kind of cool too. So it's really nice to know that those tabs are paid in full. Hey, thanks for joining us on this special Easter podcast. I enjoyed reading the story and sharing some time with you. Now I'm going to get into some celebrations of my own. I'm going to take a little walk outside and hope the pollen doesn't take me down. Hey, please be kind, be gentle, be very tolerant. Remember, kindness is for free. Spread it around as much as you can. It can only make this world a better place. So happy Easter, happy Sunday, happy Passover, happy whatever day you're celebrating. I got to get these guys out of here now because these guys, you got to go home and enjoy your own celebration. So, hey, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now, and happy Easter. And this is like one of those Marvel movies. You gotta watch it to the end. Hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy from Paterson, New Jersey. Bye-bye for now.